As Juve look to bolster their defense again, they might need to hope that Kivior is an expert in cybersecurity also. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend Adam. Adam, how we doing, man?
Very good. And my password is Juventus 2 exclamation mark. No, I'm keeping well, thank you, Rory. How are things in Milan?
All good. Yeah, obviously pretty terrible weekend football-wise all round, but I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to think about it for now. We are going to talk about, of course, if you have not seen it yet, we were alluding to in the intro the fact that Juventus's English Twitter account was hacked today, and they were delighted to announce the signing of Arda Güler, and also the fact that the Fenerbahce chairman has stepped down. So I think it was almost definitely the leak or the hack came from Turkey. I think we can figure that out. But yeah, maybe Juve need to shore up that defense. Adam, how was your weekend?
Very good, thank you. Wycombe Wanderers went back to winning ways again, so I'm really happy with the form so far. And I'm trying to be, on the floor, on the feet, should we say, stabilised, not overthinking it. But yeah, you can't help but be optimistic about our chances. So good football as well on show. 3 points off second spot with a game in hand. So it's looking quite promising, mate.
It's looking good. I saw Kone with his 11-minute hat trick, perfect hat trick.
9 minutes, 9 minutes. And I'm trying to work out, and this is the thing, it's very skeptic, shall we say, in terms of the information out there on the interweb, as we would call it. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any common knowledge of how quickly a, say, substitute in the Football League, how quickly they've scored a hat trick. Now, the last player to have done it was John Taylor for Peterborough, ironically, the opponents on Saturday, and he scored it in 12 minutes in 2016. Wow. So Kone's already beaten that. Now, it's obviously not the quickest ever overall hat trick. The quickest was James Hayter back in the day.
What a name.
Under 3 minutes he did it in. So, some feat. But yeah, 9 minutes as a substitute it almost evokes Lewandowski when he came off for Bayern Munich those many years ago. So yeah, I'm not saying Richard Kone is quite Lewandowski yet, but you never know. You can hope.
The Lewandowski of League One, we'll take it. I think we'll take that, right? Nice. Well, guys, we are actually going to talk about Serie A. There was quite a lot that happened this weekend. We had quite a few top-of-the-table clashes as Juve took on Lazio. The Bianconeri getting all 3 points there, but with lots of controversy to talk about.
Yep.
Roma did succumb to Inter 1-0 as the Nerazzurri got the 3 points there. Roma looking all sorts of trouble. The Cordova are not happy at all, but Inter got the job done. Milan got 3 points in another 1-0 against Udinese, who fought so hard and probably should have got a point, but the Milan fans will take it. Elsewhere, we've got the next Lukaku maybe down towards the bottom of the table, scoring our goal of the weekend. Genoa coming from 2 goals behind to draw against Bologna. Napoli finding a way to win against Empoli. Fiorentina waking up, hitting 6 past a very woeful-looking Lecce. Venezia lost 2-0 to Atalanta. That honestly could have been 10. And Cagliari continued Torino's fascinating run of 3-2 losses by winning 3-2. Yeah. And the Davide Nicola has got the escape project on again. So, guys, we are going to take you through all of that and much more right after this break. We'll see you on the other side. Benvenuti, bentornato, and it is time to start. We're going to start in the capital. We're going to start in Rome with Roma 0, Inter 1. Martinez emphatically battering that ball into the back of the net on the break. It was kind of the only real moment of quality from either team, maybe. I would say it wasn't a game that's going to live long in the memory. But, Adam, what do you remember? What do you care about from this game? What were your impressions?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say after the goal for Martinez, I started to go into like what would I describe it? Almost like a sleeping pattern, it was fair to say, with that second half. But yeah, I thought first half was very entertaining, very end-to-end, very open, lots of chances for both sides. As you say, there was a lack of quality in that respect. And I don't know, Rory, if that was driven by the fact that Inter endured 2 quick injuries in Acerbi and obviously Çalhanoğlu very early on. It looks like a combination of maybe hamstring or thigh injuries for both. So obviously that was a precaution given, I suppose, they've got the Derby d'Italia next weekend. So, but yeah, I think obviously that probably impacted the way Inzaghi tried to go about this game. Inter looks lively, but they had their shaky moments at the back, and I think the main concern, I think, from a Roma perspective was the lack of quality in the final third. You could see the likes of Paulo Dybala getting visibly frustrated with his teammates and the actions. For example, Dovbik's kind of first touch was a bit suspect at moments. Zalewski again kind of showed intent, but kept on doing things like where he was overcomplicating the final ball or just losing it, and that frustrated the crowd. Obviously, wasn't helped, Rory, by the fact that the Curva also did their demonstration for Daniele De Rossi by not turning up initially for the first few moments of the game as well, so the atmosphere wasn't maybe quite there. So I think, despite this, the overriding thought was Inter had their moments. Marcus Thuram was probably guilty of a lot of them. Probably should have done better with some of the opportunities. But first half, it was very lively, and I thought, wow, this could be an interesting game. And it wasn't until that goal was actually scored that I thought, wow, this has opened it up. But then it kind of was subdued, wasn't it, Rory?
Yeah, I feel like I found it odd how both teams responded, because after that goal, Inter very much like, now the goal, we need to talk about how it actually happened.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
Roma are kind of pressing, pushing forward. Two
Well, it was
mistakes.
a corner, wasn't it? Corner, and just
exactly.
reaction from the corner, bounce to Zalewski. Zalewski unfortunately doesn't control it properly and loses control of it. Fratesi, in credit to him, he chased it down, so he made it awkward for Zalewski. But on the counter, he goes into the final third only with De Marco and obviously Martinez on the kind of chase alongside Celik, and I think it was Mancini and possibly Indica. But as the ball kind of goes into the box, it's not cleared by Celik. Celik almost basically set it up for Martinez, unfortunately. And no matter, that would have been a beautiful assist in that respect. However, yeah, Martinez, you have to give it to him. What a fantastic finish, wasn't it?
It was incredible. I felt really bad for Celik, because I felt like he didn't actually have the worst game. I feel like after that mistake, he really kind of pushed on. There was a tackle shortly after that where he kind of definitely stopped in to get in a second. I feel like he was one of the players that was more active for Roma, but that's kind of like, there's definitely damning with fake praise, I'll be honest. But I feel like that goal kind of sums up how the game was, because Inter were quite happy to soak up the pressure, and they knew that Roma have this real issue with not getting numbers back quickly enough whenever a team breaks, and that goal just summed it all up, I thought. But once Roma scored, Inter did just kind of go, okay, we can just manage this game now. If we get another one, then fantastic. But like you said, beyond the first half where Inter had a few shaky moments, like Sommer kind of threw the ball onto his own post, and there was a few, but he didn't really have that much to do. Roma, I felt like they always got up until the area or up until the penalty box, and then it dissipated. It kind of faded away. They weren't able to get that shot off. They weren't able to get that final ball. There was only 2 or 3 moments in the game where I thought, okay, Dovbyk and Dybala are kind of like bouncing off each other. There was a point where he like chested it down, Dybala ran onto it, and I thought, okay, you've got it. Like, come on, we got. But it just wasn't anywhere near consistent enough. And I think, as you said, with the injuries that Inter picked up, like Çalhanoğlu is a huge player for Inter, and like Acerbi's massive at the back. Like, I feel like Roma really could have like stepped it up and pressured and tried to take advantage of that bit of uncertainty that maybe would have come into the Inter team. But they just did not cause them anywhere near enough problems. And I think with Roma, everything's just, it feels like the season's slipping away already now, and it's just kind of try and get into Europe, but there's no real excitement. This thing of sacking De Rossi, and now like Juric has kind of come in, and it's not necessarily his fault. There's not necessarily anything he can do about it, but the mood is terrible. The players clearly still like the old manager, and it's like whatever he's trying to implement, whatever he's trying to change, it just isn't really having effect yet, and it just makes it look like the owners, like if they'd have just kept De Rossi, they still would have won the games that they won under Juric. They would have beaten Venezia at home, right? They would have, like, I don't think the results would have been much different to how they are now. So I think they've just caused a huge problem at the club, a rift with the fan base, with the players, for no real tangible reward. So I think this kind of adds to that feeling of just like, what are we doing here? And like every time I watch Roma, it just again sums up the horrendous squad planning, that like you've bought this 6'8" striker and you've got no wingers. Like,
Yeah.
the whole time I was just screaming out, cross it into the fucking box. Like, it was always like low whipped crosses or like just massive floaty crosses that you're like, you want to get in, like whip it in so he can run onto it, get his head on it. It just feels like there's no players there that either that are able to do it, or Joric isn't telling them to do it, or they're just not capable of doing it. I don't know, but like it just really feels like there's no clear plan there at all, and the squad just looks so disjointed. If it wasn't for Miles Villar, this score would have been much worse as well. 100%. By the way, like he's such a good goalkeeper.
He's incredibly good.
He's genuinely like very consistent, good shot stopper. Like really dominates his area. He comes out and like intercepts when he needs to. Fairly decent with his feet. Like I think he's one of the few things that like has been like a bright light for Roma, like getting rid of Patricio and bringing him in. So I think for Roma, just really fucking super disappointing. But I did think weirdly it was one of Pellegrini's better games that I've seen recently.
Yeah. I think with
he did look a bit more effective and it caused. He was one of the few who caused problems for Inter. Like whatever Roma did do to cause problems, Pellegrini was usually involved. Dybala just looked. There just isn't that relationship there for him to bounce off Dovbyk yet, and they need to figure out that attack quick. But for Inter, they did respond to the two injuries very well. I thought Mkhitaryan was fantastic in this game. I feel like he really stepped up into Çalhanoğlu's shoes and kind of fulfilled that role. Like, how did you feel about Inter's performance? I also really loved Bastoni dribbling past, I can't remember who it was now. I think it was Dybala, right? And he like nutmegged him.
It was
like, there was some really nice performances here for Inter,
right? Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it kind of showed a bit more grit and determination to grind out the results. This was something that maybe was playing on Inzaghi's mind that maybe they've not been able to do consistently. Maybe they've lost that bit of touch, energy once they've got the lead, for example. I think they like to take their foot off the gas, and I think credit to them because it was quite easy potentially to let Roma back into this match and through dubious kind of circumstances. I think Pavard, for example, had shaky moments, it's fair to say. I wasn't convinced when De Vrij did come on, but I thought he had an actual solid occasion here. But as you allude to, obviously that gap from Çalhanoğlu left an opportunity for someone to fill it in. Fratezi's entered into the pitch, and between him and Çalhanoğlu, should I say Mkhitaryan actually, sorry, they filled that kind of gap. They kind of made sure that the ball was playing, and it was good to see Barella back into the fold as well, obviously back from injury. That was a really important kind of minutes in his game as well. I'd argue that. I think the concern from an Inter perspective, however, is more aimed at a combination of defensive moments to iron out, but also Marcus Thuram and how wasteful he was in front of goal. He should have had at least one of the 3 chances that he had. I think there was one shot which you would say great save by Svila, but there's a few occasions where I think maybe he should do better. And I don't know, this was something that was brought upon this evening, actually, Rory, where we saw Dougie Critchley talk about best players in each league so far, and he kind of singled out Thuram. Now, I think stats-wise, definitely you look at it objectively and you go, wow, he's done really well. But actually, when you're watching him play, I think he flatters to deceive. I think he could do a lot better. And I think last season Thuram was actually better than this season Thuram to many respects. And I think that's because of just the way we know he had higher standards aiming to prove his kind of worth for this Inter side. Whereas this season, trying to establish himself and maybe be a bit more consistent in front of goal, I think he's almost trying it a bit too hard. I mean, what's your take on Thuram's season?
Well, there was an interview with him where he said he's changed his game himself, and he wants to focus on more just being a striker, like just scoring goals, not doing the kind of the breaks and the build-up play that he was doing last season. Like he was such an important ball carrier last year for Inter as well. Like the amount of times he'd get the ball and just sprint up the field. And I feel like we've not really seen him doing that this much. This year, he's trying more to get on the end of those balls, and like that's fine. I get it. You're a striker. You're there to score goals, and maybe him and Inzaghi have come up with this new thing. We want you to fulfill this role, and maybe it's just taking him a while to kind of adapt to this role and get there. But you got to say he has still scored 7 goals this season, so he's not doing terribly. Like it's only game week 8, right? He's done pretty well, but yeah, it feels like he's not that as obvious a threat as he was when he came into the league last year. But maybe a part of that as well is the fact that he came in on a free. People didn't know what to expect. And then he did just absolutely explode into the league. So maybe there's a bit of like us being used to him now and like a bit of the novelty's worn off. But I do think like he has kind of changed his role this year and we're seeing a different kind of Thuram. But he wasn't the only wasteful player. I feel like Dumfries, when he came on, he could have had 3 or 4 goals. The agent of chaos that is Dumfries, he could have had 3 or 4 goals, but he managed to waste them all. I think 1 or 2 were saved from Svilar quite well as well. I think 1-0 definitely flatters Roma, but Inter maybe just need to be a little bit more cutthroat. But they won't care because this is a massive 3 points with Napoli winning earlier in the day. And, of course, with Milan winning and Juve winning, it was absolutely vital that Inter kept up pace. And I think the kind of theme of this weekend really is just the teams finding a way to win because none of them really impressed. They all just got the job done. So speaking of which, we're going to move on to the next one. Was there anything else we want to talk about with Roma and Inter?
I mean, the only other point I would have said is, do we think this is going to be a free manager season for Roma? Because it is certainly shaping up like it, right?
Well, it could be a 2-manager season when they rehire De Rossi. Because there's honestly, I don't think it's impossible. And the
there's
headline
today, right? There's always Totti as well.
Well, exactly. The headline that caused a stir today that was apparently, how old is he now? 45-year-old Totti has been in talks with some Serie A clubs about returning as a player. Now, look, Serie A is the pensioners league, right? Old players do well here.
They do.
Oh, I don't know, Totti, just leave it.
Step too far.
Continue playing Calcetto. The risk of you ruining your legacy is far too high here. Just step away gracefully, please, Francesco. But, for the pod, we would have great content. So I'm kind of torn, if you know what I mean. But we will see. We will see. Let's go up to Turin and Roma's cross-city rivals as Juve beat Lazio 1-0. And this game was a little bit of chaos. Romagnoli, the kind of key point here, Romagnoli was sent off for a last man tackle, a lot of them this weekend.
Yeah.
On VAR, there's an angle where it kind of looked like he got the ball.
I know what you mean, yeah.
It wasn't clear enough, so I understand it was a red card, right? And it's like the Kalulu, who was the furthest player forward running through the pitch for whatever reason, would have been
striker now. Into the penalty box. He's a striker. Why not?
But Vlahovic can't hit a barn door. Can you go up there, please? But he was running into the box. It was taken out. I do have a doubt about whether Romagnoli got a touch on the ball first, but it's a red card. And then from here on in, the game completely changes. Obviously, Lazio go down to 10 men. They have to shift, and it is very much attack versus defence. But the issue here, and what has been the main talking point, is what happened before that red card. In the Lazio box, Douglas Luiz, it seemed punched. Who is it? Fabian? No.
It was Patrick.
No, who did he punch?
Patrick,
that's it. He didn't seem to. He punched Patrick. But it wasn't reported to VAR, or VAR didn't check it. The ref wasn't told, or the ref, I don't know. But there was a complete breakdown of communication, and this wasn't punished. Now, obviously, this is a huge moment because that happens before Lazio go down to 10 men. Juve had a pretty shocking record at home. Like before this, their only win at home was against Como. They've not been free scoring. This is a game that Lazio really would have felt like they could have won.
Yeah.
The fun thing was Fabiani, who is their sporting director, and I love this about Italian football. I wish we got directors of football on Match of the Day after games to complain. But on the novantesima minuto, like their version of Match of the Day on a Saturday night, he was interviewed and he said, why did VAR not check Luis? Loro prendono un caffè. Were they away taking a coffee? I don't know why they weren't watching. They were kind of questioning him and being, oh, come on, be reasonable. There's only one angle. And he's like, yeah, there's only one angle. There are more cameras in this stadium than there is in the rest of Europe, and we can only see one angle. Like, this is a crime. I don't know why. And they were really trying to calm him down, but it wasn't working. And he was like really insistent with it. But I think he's got a point, right?
Yeah.
This is as clear a violence off the ball red card moment as you're going to get, right?
Yeah, it's another moment where Juventus fans will probably call it hashtag Marotta League, right? But it is very much a case of same stadium again, where VAR should be utilised to really highlight, I suppose, how bad that decision really was. Luis, again, this is the second time he's almost got away with a situation like this because there was, I can't remember which game it was now, but he obviously gave away the penalty against Calgary, right? And then
Yeah,
prior to that, he also did something with a team where he kind of did similar circumstances where he got away with
yeah.
not getting potentially a second yellow card. So
Mhm.
he's not having a good time. And it was also confirmed earlier today that him and his girlfriend, let me get right, Alicia Lehman, have had their house burgled in Turin. So he's not
Wow.
having a great time in Turin. It's fair to say. Who would have guessed that Birmingham's more safer than Turin? I wouldn't have said that myself before. But
Oh
yeah,
God,
he's not.
Italians and robbing footballers is like a national hobby. It's insane. Even during the Napoli-Empoli game, is it Patrick Kendrick was talking
Yes.
about how often Napoli players get robbed. It just happens all the frigging time here. But Italy's a great country, guys. I'm telling you, it's beautiful.
Apart from
Yeah,
that, it's all
yeah.
fine, right?
But I think there's a lot of
But
Juve fans that aren't particularly happy with Douglas Luiz's start in here in a Juve
no, it's
shirt.
fair to
He's
say.
not been impressive
No.
at all, and this is another moment where he could have cost his game. He could have cost his team a lot of
Yeah.
points, but it wasn't to be. Lazio did go down to 10 men, and then Juve basically just bored everyone to death in failing to hit the target. I think we have to give Lazio a lot of credit in the way they defended,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
commitment.
100%.
They're like a really
Resilient.
hard team to
Yeah.
beat. And like Baroni has got them really well drilled.
Mm.
They're really they even still had a few chances, not many, but they had one
Yeah.
or two chances where
Hard,
they were
doesn't
kind
it?
of trying to get forward. But all this just screamed to me that Juve just do not have have enough imagination or creativity throughout this team. And again, all the talk around this from a Juve point of view seems to be we need to sort out the defense. We need to get another defender in. We need defensive cover. But their defensive record actually is
It's pretty
very
good.
good this year, right? The defense has not been
Yeah.
an issue. Their issue is they cannot score goals and they're far too predictable. And I think the only way, like, obviously, the goal that finally comes is kind of cross across the box. The defender sticks a
Very
foot out.
lucky.
It's really unlucky. It's an own goal.
Mm.
Without that, this game finishes 0-0 because there was no
Yeah.
way Juve was scoring in a month of Sundays. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, Adam, why do you think that Motta is just not able to get the attacking potential out of this team? Is it a lack of personnel? Is it like them not being varied enough? I feel like he's just, again, it's only 8 games in, so you have to but they really should be getting more.
Yeah. They seem to lack a creative spark, don't they? They just seem to lack someone that can just do something out of the ordinary in that respect. And I don't think it's helped by the system that they're playing, because although we know about how fluid Motta likes to have his players so they can adapt to different formations and different styles of play, for example, I feel at the moment they are playing to the narrative of having Dusan Vlahovic, who, as a club, they need to justify the money that they've spent for him, right? So, but equally, there's a combination of he's not necessarily getting the service, but also he's not helping himself in the positions that he's choosing, for example. I think he's not being one or the other in terms of the type of striker he is. So we don't know if he's kind of waiting to latch on to bits, or is he the one that's going to try and create those moments? And he's sort of floating between the two, so we don't quite know. And I think maybe his teammates don't actually know what to expect from him, right? So I think that's probably an element of it. But also, like you say, it took a cross that was kind of sliced by Mario Gila to actually score that goal. That suggests to me that they've got no idea apart from get it into the box.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago, I talked about the element of Koopmeiners being lost in that midfield and not being able to maybe get himself onto the ball and maybe be an influence for the team. And I think that's the problem, is that you've got some talented players, but they still trying to work out each other and transition in terms of their style of football. So I think there's a combination of different things. the point about defensive element, I think they're only trying to get someone in to kind of have as a backup to obviously Gelson Bremer, who obviously he's out for the rest of the season. But to your point, I think they really need to look at the kind of creative outlets from the wings position, as well as maybe someone to challenge Dusan Vlahovic. I know obviously a lot was maybe speculated about Milik's kind of fitness, and perhaps maybe that's the reason why they haven't gone into the marketplace. But you can imagine they will address that in January. The problem, I would say, Rory, is who are they likely to bring in that's going to be available that could score goals, for example? I don't see that necessarily being this window. I think it will be more likely to be addressed in the summer. And if they're going to get someone in, it's going to be a temporary fix. It's going to be someone that potentially this player will not be wanted by the other club. So it might be a case of he'll need a few games to get to fitness and to the ways of working. So I think I've always said this at the beginning, I felt Juventus is always going to be in a transition season. They haven't got the depth, right, Rory? But I think this really does highlight, I suppose, some of the issues that Motta is going to have to address. And let's not forget about this element. When Motta's been at places like Spezia, like Bologna, where he's managed to get a tune out of them, it's happened over a number of seasons. It's not happened straight away. So I think the expectation is higher. He's getting results, albeit not fashionably in the style of football that many maybe want. But equally, look, I think he's got challenges. I think he's having to deal with the politics of Juventus, and then you've got also the kind of availability of players that he's got to work with. And it takes a lot to rely on kids, ultimately, Rory.
Well, this is it. They are kind of changing their direction, right? And even like the players that came off the bench, you've got Adzic, you've got Fagioli. Like these are players that have come through the kind of the club, and they're obviously trying to switch to this kind of focus. But yeah, I feel like the lack of creative spark in that midfield, like Luis isn't a particularly creative midfielder. He's like, defensive, he'll run, decent passing range. Thuram is kind of the same. And then Locatelli isn't that, like, he's not a number 10. Like, and I think there's just not that spark in midfield to kind of make you unpredictable. So it meant that for Lazio, it was fairly easy going up until it wasn't, right? But I think we have to give them some credit. They did play incredibly well with the fact that they were down to 10 men. Tavares didn't get an assist. And Providel had a difficult night, but did make some good saves. I feel like his form he's been off and on this year, but this was one of his better games, so maybe he's getting back to where he was. But Juve do get the 3 points, and that keeps them within the touching distance of the top, as they are now on 16 points, only 3 points behind Napoli and 1 point behind Inter. Let's go down to fourth place, and let's talk about Milan Udinese. And guys, it was another 1-0. And there was another red card. But this time it was the team who won that got the red card. Now, this red card, I think, was super, super harsh. Reinders was it was another last man.
Yes,
there is the slightest touch on the Udinese player and he goes down. Again, like by letter of the law, it's a red card. But did you think it was harsh? I thought it was super harsh.
I'd have to re-watch it again, but from the time that I saw it, I thought he's last man. That's by letter of law. He has to go, unfortunately. I might have to review, because there's been so many, like you say, there's been so many red cards this weekend. I'm trying to rack my brains as to who was the chasing defenders at that very moment, but I did seem to recall it was Buyol who floats the ball into the middle. Reinders is the Milan kind of last man defensively, and he's really struggling to keep up with him, but basically barges into him. So there was no choice personally. So I think it was the right decision. Up until that point, though, Rory, Milan had dominated play. They'd had 75% of the possession. They dominated. They'd taken the lead already by that point, and it looked threatening every time that they did pick up the ball. But as you say, by that point, as the red card is dished out, it changes the dynamic of the game. In the second half, Udinese, full of credit, somehow they couldn't get the ball in the back of the net for love nor money, but also from a VAR perspective, that last goal by Cabasele, just adjudged by a single toe, like a toe. There's a line, there's that toe. It's absolutely insane.
That's the closest offside call I've ever seen. That is like the smallest margin I've ever seen in an offside call. It was insane. It's literally, the outside of his little toe that is like, and I get it, again, letter of the law, it's kind of offside, but I thought,
it's black and white, right? That's what it is.
This is not what we got in the game for, right? Now, the only reason I say the Rangers one is harsh is because I think there was a similar one in Inter Roma. I want to say it was an Inter defender on a Roma player. I can't remember who it was, where he clattered, and there was much more contact with like last man tackle, and it wasn't given like as a red card. So it's the only reason why I saw that and then saw the Rangers one. I thought there wasn't much contact. It's kind of like his chest kind of grazed him or something, and he goes down. And obviously the player's going to go down. You don't get the decision otherwise,
of course.
But it was just another one where I was like, where's this consistency? Like, if you know what I mean? Because I think like Inter, I'm pretty sure it was Inter to Roma, like kind of got away with it. But if we stick to Milan Udinese, as you did say, they did start the game incredibly well. Chukwueze getting the goal, lovely little finish as well.
Good move.
He looked really threatening throughout, to be honest. I feel like he's a player that really, I don't know, 8 times he plays, he's completely anonymous, and then 2 times he plays, he looks like the best winger on the planet, and you're like, wow, who is this guy? And it was one of those days. I thought he played really, really well, but we have to say, Udinese, well, do we praise them or not? Because they were against 10 men for a very long time, and they weren't really able to break Milan down, but they kind of did, because they had 2 goals disallowed for very small margins.
Yeah, no, they were very unlucky. I agree with you that I think, because of how direct Milan were in that first instance, it completely took Udinese by surprise, and I think they really struggled to adapt to the way and approach that Milan took. But as soon as they were down to 10 men, then they made a game of it. They really did have opportunities in this game, and they really took it to Milan. Obviously, they had a goal ruled offside in the first half, but as I allude to, as the second one in the particular incident where it's in stoppage time, I think it was 7th minute of injury time. Kabasele thinks he's got the ball into the back of the net, and it looks legit, and it's just called off for offside by the tightest of margins. So that shows you how tight it was. But full of credit, because Udinese did kind of create a lot of opportunities in that second half. But that's also credit to, I suppose, this Milan side, Rory, because a few weeks back, maybe we wouldn't have had this kind of stubbornness from a defensive point of view, from a Milan point of view. And they managed to make it tight. They made, even in the moments where Udinese were dominating the play, they still managed to keep hold of the ball at times and still try and progress it into the final third. Tammy Abraham having a chance as well, I seem to recall. So, I think they were well worth the 3 points in the end. But it looks like it was a slog because it was 1-0 win only. But it was probably a well-deserved 1-0 win, and against an Udinese side that have been really in resurgence for the beginning of this season, maybe of late just fallen a bit. And I was expecting maybe a bit of a game. So I think no disharmony in terms of the way that Udinese approached it. I think they've done well. It's not expected for them to go and pick up 3 points at the San Siro. Let's put it that way, Rory. So for them to respectively only lose 1-0, I think that's a good showing.
Yeah, no, I think overall they were decent, but Milan got the job done, and that's all that matters. But there's still a lot of noise around the club. There's still a lot of unhappiness. Yes. The comments this week lay out after the international break. At Portugal, I have the support of everyone. The manager trusts me. He's very much not happy that Fonseca is there still. I think him and Teo are still fighting the good fight in terms of we want someone else here. And the whole noise around Milan at the moment is just like, what is the plan? What is happening? True. Because again, as good a win as this is down to 10 men, and it shows the battling spirit, and it shows, the fight, etc., it just doesn't quite feel like there's progress. It doesn't quite feel like there's, the win in the derby hasn't really been maximised to the amount that it should be. And nobody's really sure who's making decisions at the club. Nobody's sure what Ibra's role is. I saw a thing today that Ibra
he likes to get himself into the changing room as well and take over talks by all accounts. So, it seems like it's a huge mess behind the scenes because, Zlatan, if you're a managing director or a director of football, let's put it that way, you should not be getting involved in team talks. That is not your role. Unless you want to become a player again, then you shouldn't be involved in. I would be, if I was Fonseca, also pissed off And if it got to a point where it's just not no good to my relationship, I'd be just quitting because you can't work in that environment. I'd be personally calling it out as well.
Yeah.
I know it's not professional to do so, but can you imagine the amount of shit that could happen on Zlatan's kind of reputation if he starts calling out what he's actually doing behind the scenes?
Well, I think there's a lot of Milan fans that are asking that question. The only thing is Fonseca is not in a position of power to call anyone out. If the results were better and if they were really flying, he would have that backing to be like, okay, well, what's going on here, right? But because his position is the definition of tenable or untenable, he is really not in a position of power to be calling people out. But it came out today that Ibra wants to get involved in boxing. Like, I think he just knows... everybody knew, or if you didn't know, you're an idiot, that Ibra going anyway, he was going to want to be the main story. He was going to want to be, he wasn't just going to sit quietly in an office and be like, I'm going to do some admin. Like, he's going to be the guy who's getting all the headlines, and that's what he's doing. I just think there needs to be a bit of a look at what's going on at Milan, because it all goes back to when they got rid of Maldini, and that felt like they were really going in a direction. There was a clear direction, there was decisions, there was decent transfer activity, and it feels like all of that's just kind of disappeared, and now Ibra's in charge, and it just feels like a massive mess. So I think in the background, all is not well at Milan, but if they can keep picking up points, they won't mind too much. But if Fonseca is there still next season, I will be very, very surprised. It will be either him or Leao that has to leave, I imagine. But those are the big three. Those are the big three games, I think. 3-1-0s to treat you. But there were actually games that had more than one goal. And now we're going to talk about them. So let's go all the way down to the bottom of the table. And it's a shame Andrea's not here. Because, well, not quite the bottom. They've got Venezia to thank. But Lecce lost 6-0 to Fiorentina. Now, guys, these scorelines do not happen often in Serie A. Usually there's a bit of kind of unspoken agreement that like 4 and 5 and then you stop. But Fiorentina didn't get the memo. Colpani got 2 and an assist. Cataldi got 2. It was just a great day out for Fiorentina. And Adam, since that win against Milan, we were talking about, do we think this is going to be a springboard for them? Is this an opportunity for them to get a bit of momentum? Well, it looks like it is. And it looks like they've settled to a lineup now, right? He's kind of got his team. He knows what they're trying to do, and it's working.
Yeah, they look possibly to the potential that we all anticipated at the beginning of this season when Palladino kind of assembled a squad. Yassin Adli, in particular for this match, was just picking up the ball with ease and just gliding and threading through balls, and it was just joyful to watch. Kalpani looking his kind of Monza best that we knew was there, for example. Cataldi, where was that performance? That was incredible. I'm sure I've heard Andrea slag that guy off times. But the second goal in particular, a fantastic free kick. And this was at the moment when Lecce gets down to 10 men as well, because that's the very moment that they get someone sent off because he's the last man. Inevitably this weekend. Another one. But yeah, fantastic kind of performance overall, because by that point in the first half, they're 3-0 down, Lecce. They've got no hope. Falcone's their only hope, by the way. He's the only one that's keeping them up. Because at this moment in time, Rory, it's fair to say, I think Lecce look like relegation favourites with Gotti at the helm. They don't look like they have progressed their style of football. They don't look even hard to beat. And that's the worry, isn't it? I think there's one thing being having a strategy which focuses on kind of being kind of stringent with the budget, for example. But it's another to ensure that you've got the right players in, to ensure that there's a team that can sustain a season. And I feel with Lecce, because they've gone the other way, where they've sold a lot of their talents, Pongracic was the other one that went to Fiorentina, ironically, for big money at the time as well. And it doesn't feel like they've been able to invest that in terms of staying in the league. Now, there's a player that obviously they got from Lech Poznan, Machwinski, who was very excited to kind of see what he could do. not even had many outings this season. These are the type of players that you would have expected to maybe have had a bit more game time just to kind of show some attacking intent. But they've really struggled. I mean, if you think about the game week 7 where they drew against Parma 2-2, if you recall that match where obviously Parma come back from the dead, essentially. They're 2-0 down. It's the 91st minute. Kristovic goes in on goal, should make it 3, and then Parma still managed to claw it back to make it 2-2. I think that shows you the fragility of this side, and obviously on this occasion against Fiorentina, 6 goals probably flattered them. I think it could have been even more had it not been for Falcone. Yeah, Rory, I mean, it's probably a pleasant household at the moment, given your wife's connections or your missus' connections to Bologna.
Exactly, and for people listening, I'm currently repping the Bardi shirt, so I should be dancing around the room, really, because, Lecce getting spanked 6-0 at home is not like, there's a real reason to celebrate. But I feel like Lecce were always hard to beat, right? They were always 1-0s, 2-1s. They never got battered. It was always just that one goal or that one moment. And when they beat teams, it was a 1-0, it was a 2-1.
Yeah.
And I feel like under as good a job as Gotti did when he came in towards the end of last season and kind of pulled them out of the mire that they were potentially slipping into, they've just not started the season with the same vigor at all. They've not got that same discipline, and they're just not as hard to run through. So I think if I'm the Lecce owner, I'm looking at who is on the market and who can fish us out of this state, because it looks like, and there's still players there that I insist are good enough for Serie A, right? I still think Kustovic is a decent striker.
Yeah.
I still think players like Bashirotto, Udan, like Ramadani, these aren't terrible players. They are good Serie A players that I think just need a bit more structure and defensive solidity. And you've got a goalkeeper there that should be playing higher up the league as well. But you can't stop the tide, right? You can't hold back the tide. So I think, they just need maybe a fresh voice in there, because that's going to be easier than replacing a whole squad, right? But for Fiorentina, absolutely fantastic result for them. Real momentum for them at the moment, which is really good. The only issue I saw that Gudmundsson went off injured in the 9th minute, which was maybe a little bit of a precaution, a little bit of a worry. We'll have to see how bad that one is, but maybe. And Kane going off in the 46th minute with an injury. So they didn't come out unscathed, but hopefully neither of those injuries are serious. But overall, a fantastic weekend for Fiorentina. Yeah. Sorry, Andrea, I've really tried to find the grey cloud for you there amongst all the silver linings with those 2 injuries, but I managed to find it for you. Good. Let's move on to another game with lots of goals. And let's go for Genoa 2, Bologna 2. Bologna thought they had it won. They were 2-0 up. Orsolini with an Orsolini classic goal. Think of an Orsolini goal. It was that, but with a deflection. Odegaard with a beautiful goal from long distance. Really nice finish into the bottom corner. But then Bologna decided to stop playing football, and Pinamonti single-handedly dragged Genoa back into this game. That's a little bit harsh on Genoa. They did genuinely fight in this game. They really showed Gilardino that they're behind him. Adam, your thoughts on this game? Gilardino came out after the game and was like, praised the spirit of his players, thanked them for their performance, and just said, we just need to keep this spirit going, because obviously Genoa at the moment, a club with a lot of chaos going on, right?
Yeah, that's a massive result for Gilardino as well, because I think there was a fear factor that he would be sacked after the end of this result, had they lost it as well. More importantly, had they lost it. Given the circumstances, I think that shows you the kind of morale and togetherness that Gilardino has been able to instill in this group of players, despite the circumstances, despite the fact that they've had to sell in the summer as well. It says a lot about his testament, and I'm sure this will do him no harm in terms of getting a future job as well. I think this was fantastic. But I think for me, Rory, it's more a question mark on Italiano from a Bologna point of view as well, because I think if you think about the context of the summer, obviously this was definitely going to be a transitional season for Bologna, given the circumstances. They've sold their kind of 2 key players this summer. They've obviously lost their manager in Thiago Motta, and obviously brought in Italiano, and they've gone into the Champions League. So there's a lot riding on this season in terms of at least being, stable as a club. But it feels like they're going the other way, and it feels like Italiano is repeating what he did at Fiorentina, where the style of football flatters to deceive. It looks okay, but actually there's performances like this where they should be able to grind them out, and for some reason they either can't defend it or they just can't seem to grind out these results. Now, I think for me the question here, Rory, is how far do we think Italiano has at Bologna before they start thinking about where the strategy is for his future at the club? Because I don't feel inspired. I've never felt inspired by Italiano. I know he's got a good rep for his achievements with Empoli, for example, in his earlier times. I think it was Spezia, actually, potentially.
Spezia, yeah.
Sorry. But yeah, since those days, I don't think he's progressed as the up-and-coming manager that we all anticipated. I think Fiorentina was the test. He's been lucky, personally, to get the role at Bologna, given, I think, Bologna had the likes of Maurizio Sarri they could have offered the role, or Pioli, for example, who had just been relinquished at Milan. So I think there were better candidates out there for them to have built potentially a challenging side. Let's put it that way. I don't expect them to win every game, Rory, and I don't expect them to eclipse what they did last season. But I think the real question mark is around Italiano and what he actually does at Bologna, because I don't feel like they're actually inspirational in the style of football. And I can imagine to the fans, they're like a bit lost with this style of football as well.
Well, yeah, it just feels like all that progress that they made and all that, like, you know, finishing fifth and getting into the Champions League and like a real platform to build on. Now, obviously, like half your squad gets sold and there is going to be a lack of momentum. You can't just follow up and then be like, it's not fifth, fourth, third. Yeah. It's not FIFA that you're playing, right? If you know what I mean? But like, it just feels like a lot of that momentum has just completely evaporated. And even their performances in the Champions League just haven't been particularly great. And like, it feels like a lot of the optimism that was there and a lot of the enthusiasm has just kind of faded away. And it is, I think the blame has to more than slightly be laid at Italiano's door. Yeah, he wasn't fantastic at Fiorentina. Fiorentina fans were happy for him to leave, by all accounts. Like, they were like, yeah, please take him, right? So I think it's just a bit of a missed opportunity for Bologna, unfortunately. There's still a lot of players there that have got bright futures and exciting players, and, you know, like, their methodology hasn't stopped, right? They're still doing the, you know, buy cheap, sell for more, and like get like technically very good players, young, promising players. I just think they need we know that Italiano's teams can't score, but then they do finally score 2 goals and they can't defend. And you think, well, what is going on here? Like, so it's just a really, really disappointing performance for Bologna, but we do have to give credit for Genoa because I think they're going to need this fight throughout the rest of the season. And it's just a really good sign for Gilardino as a manager that his players weren't willing to just throw it in at 2-0. And Pinamonti, 2 really good, like well-taken goals.
Very good.
He's kind of quietly having a fairly okay season. I don't want to do too much, but, you know, because he's shown these false dawns before, but this was a performance at least that they can be encouraged by. So yeah, 2-2 there. And if you didn't see it before the game in Genoa, they had motorbikes jumping onto the pitch because there was some Red Bull event. It all looked a bit mad. It looked a bit American. I don't know what was going on. But let's move on to another goal fest. Torino continued their third 3-2 loss in a row as they lose 3-2 to Cagliari. Coco with an auto goal, an own goal in the 78th minute to ultimately seal it. But bloody hell, Torino managed to come from a goal down. They got 2-1 up and then just threw it away. It's not really happening for Torino at the moment anymore. Since I've been on the Eurotales podcast to talk about how they can finish in Europe, they've not won a game. Adam, what's happening? It's all gone wrong.
It's the Anglo-Italian podcast curse, isn't it? That's what's happened. We've talked them up, so it's going to happen. Unfortunately, in this particular match, I think also we have to give credit to Davide Nicola because he's managing to do the run of form that we didn't anticipate to happen over these course of games, right? So Parma, Juventus, and now Torino. We'll just isolate it to this game for numbers' sakes. Viola, great hit for the first goal. As you mentioned, Sanabria gets the initial equaliser from a headed option. And, you know, Sanabria is going to have to be the sole kind of target man. I think he's going to have to step up to be the Duvan Zapata, but not like Duvan Zapata, unfortunately. But Carolinetti, who's obviously taken the captain's armband, what a strike. That was
This is
one
a
of the
hell
goals
of a
this
goal.
weekend. And
Yeah.
I don't know if he picks up an injury, unfortunately, Rory, but he comes off with like the last 15 minutes of the game. So prior to that actual winning goal, he obviously has to come on. But credit to Palomino, who comes on, headers in the equaliser for Calgary. And then, as you say, cross into the box, and it just kind of deflects very quickly off Sal Koku past Milinkovic-Savic, who, ironically, Savic had to make a few stops prior to that moment actually taking place, so he kept them in the game itself. So yeah, unfortunately, I think this is just really, I suppose, the levels that Torino have just found themselves now. Unfortunately, they haven't got the depth of quality. I think there'll be a lot of finger pointing to the chairman again, saying, look, spend more money on the club rather than your fucking newspaper, basically.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's going to happen, isn't it? But fair play to Calgary. That's where the credit's due for this match. We don't have to worry about Polly, the actual mascot, getting a
He's
thrashing
got another
from
week
the
off.
extras.
He's got another week off. Sunning himself in the swimming pool. He's having a great time. But this does take Cagliari up to 15th place, 3 points clear of Genoa in the relegation zone, and just gives them a little bit of hope. Now, unbeaten in 3, 2 wins and a draw. Absolutely massive, considering the way we were talking about him a couple of weeks ago. The turnaround has been huge. So never doubt Davide Nicola. Never doubt him.
Never.
He will always get there in the end. We were writing him off, and we will not do it again, Davide. We apologise. And the last game, or maybe the last game, the penultimate game we're going to talk about. No, the trinultimate. I don't know if that's a word. Venezia 0, Atalanta 2. This could have been 8-0. Pasalic was absolutely unbelievable. He got the first goal. Retegui with an incredible little chip to make it 2-0. Venezia were absolutely woeful. Atalanta so wasteful in goals. So wasteful in front of goal. It was criminal, honestly. Like the definition of one-way traffic. But they did get the job done. 2-0 for them. 1-1 in Como versus Parma. As I did say at the top of the show, Boni goal of the week without a doubt. A lovely little back heel around the goalkeeper just into the back post. Beautiful finish. He has been dubbed the Lukaku of the future, and Napoli were apparently looking at him and are now even more looking at him as a replacement for Lukaku when he,
eventually
implodes
pops
next,
off,
whenever that is. But Boni, a player that everyone's very excited about, and rightly so. And Path getting the goal. We hyped him up, and the Anglo-Italian curse hasn't kicked in just yet. He got his first goal in Serie A after setting up Messi in the international break this week. He put up a really cool post on Instagram where Messi gave him his shirt, and he was like, what a week, I've just assisted the greatest player that there's ever been, and now scored my first goal in Serie A. Just like, oh my, what a guy. What a week. Absolutely love it. And the final game, of course, we need to talk about the table toppers in the Battle of the Pollies. Napoli beat Empoli 1-0. This game was really not much fun. Empoli were fantastic first half.
They were good.
And I tweeted at half time, it'll be really interesting to see if Empoli can keep up this level of intensity. Listener, it turns out they couldn't. The pressing was so violent in the first half. Then the second half, they just completely dropped off. And I think they were just hoping to get through the first 5-10 minutes of the second half and then maybe push through. But in the 63rd minute, penalty, soft penalty for me, but a penalty. And Cavada took it away super confidently. And then basically nothing else happened. The only player here that I was I'm always looking for the next player at Empoli that I'm going to be hyping as like, who's the next, Baldanzi, who's the next Verratti, who's the next player that they're going to be selling on. And I've decided, where did I put his name? It is Fazzini, is 21 years old. I thought he played very well, showed some really, really promising moments. Definitely needs a bit more discipline in his positioning, but I thought he showed technically some real ability. So I think really, excited by him. But Napoli got a 1-0 win. I think Conte after the game said himself, we just need to find a way to win games. And
he was relieved to go out with a win, right? That was it.
Exactly. But that is about all we can say about that game. So guys, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk all things European football, because it's back this week. It's back. And we are back. It's time to preview all of the European football in the Champions League. We have Milan hosting Club Brugge. Should be a fairly routine win for Milan there. They'll be hoping. Then we have Juve taking on Stuttgart. I think this is going to be a tricky one. Stuttgart, very good in the Bundesliga. Really, obviously last year's surprise package, but managing to keep up the levels. So Juve struggling at home a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if they can get the job done here. They've been fairly free scoring in the Champions League, but I think this is their toughest test yet.
Yes.
Then we have Aston Villa hosting Bologna. Lovely little tie that. Quite excited about that, although we have just been slagging off Italiano for a while, so Villa fans, you can feel a little bit confident. And we have Atalanta hosting Celtic, so Bergamo will currently be full of lots of Glaswegians in the central piazza having a great time. I think that could be a real hipster's favourite of a game there. But judging by Atalanta's attacking play this weekend, Celtic are going to have to be a lot better than they were in the last European game week. And then finally, the last game, Young Boys will be hosting Inter. They look terrible about it against Villa, so Inter should be filling their boots with that one. In the Europa League, we have Roma taking on Dinamo Kiev, and we have Lazio heading to Holland to take on SC Twente. And in the Conference League, finally, we have St. Gallen in Switzerland, I think that is, hosting Fiorentina. And those are your European matches. Those are across Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Of course, check that app on your phone. They'll give you all the details. Adam, the Serie A fixtures.
Let's go. So round 9 of games starting on Friday, and we've got 5:30 p.m. kickoff time where Udinese hosts Calgary. Then that will be followed up by 7:45 where Torino hosts Como. We move into Saturday's game starting at 2 p.m. Napoli at home to Lecce before at 5 p.m. We've got Bologna at home to Milan. Then at 7:45 we've got Atalanta at home to Hellas Verona. And then we finally move into Sunday's fixtures. So at 11:30, Parma at home to Empoli before we start seeing the 2 p.m. kickoff times. So we'll start seeing Lazio at home to Genoa, Monza at home to Venezia, and then we move into the big games. So starting off at 5 p.m, Derby d'Italia, where we see Inter at home to Juventus. And then 7:45 p.m. kickoff time, we've got Fiorentina at home again against Roma. And then, Rory, we move into some midweek fixtures for game week 10, but we'll kind of review that next week.
Beautiful. Well, Adam, we can't go without talking about the Derby d'Italia. This is going to be absolutely huge. How do you see this game going? Inter at home, I think Inter have to be, after the loss in the derby, this is like a really big game for Inzaghi to be like, no, we're still here. We're still contending for this, right? It's a big game.
Yeah, huge test for both sides in that respect, Rory, because I think there'll be some demands on Juventus to have a better showing against the bigger sides, and that obviously this is going to be a huge opportunity to Motta to be tested in terms of that stylistic football that he's implemented. Obviously, we aren't necessarily seeing the fruits of that stylistic football. It feels like Allegri 3.0 at the moment. However, yes, you are right to allude to the fact that Inzaghi will want to put the rights, or the rights of the wrong, should I say, from the Milan derby. So yeah, it's important for Inter to get back to winning ways in the big games. And it's important from a kind of point of chasing the Scudetto as well, because if Napoli are given any whiff of another gap, that's going to help their cause no end. So yeah, it's important from Inzaghi's point of view, but also from a Thiago Motta's point of view. This could be an interesting encounter, but I suspect Inter will do their utmost to make sure that they do all that is physically possible to ensure they win this match. But Rory, I think injuries might be playing a part in terms of the personnel for this match. So let's see. But I'm looking forward to it. It should be a very entertaining game.
Yeah, I can't wait. The blessing for Inter is that they can rest a few players as they're playing young boys in Europe this week. They don't have to play Barella for 90 minutes. If Çalhanoğlu needs a rest and the injury isn't that bad, it's fine. Like, they can kind of maybe put out a bit of, you might see your Bissex playing in that striker that they had on Arnautovic, he might get a minute. If you know what I mean, like just those players that maybe weren't really. Correa, we saw Correa, maybe he'll get a start. But yeah, I feel like that's the blessing for Inter, so they can have a kind of week of rest before heading into this game. But it's going to be a banger. It's going to be a banger. No matter what happens, guys, we will be there. And we will be there to tell you all about it as well. So make sure you join us next week. Adam, anything to say to the listener before I send them home?
Just check us out on our social media platforms. Make sure you're subscribed to all of them. And more importantly, on this YouTube video, make sure you give us a like and subscribe. So thank you for doing that so far if you have.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys. For those social media platforms, you can find us on Twitter or X at Italian Anglo Pod. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Anglo-Italian Pod. As Adam did say, if you're listening to the podcast, just open your phone, give us a follow, give us a rating, and call me a knobhead. That's all you need to do. And then we can move on with the rest of our weeks. Guys, make sure to check out our Premier League show now. It should be on your feed when you're there. And we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Ciao. A dopo.
Ciao, ciao.